Human trafficking is intricately linked to movements of population due to economic conditions, due to rising unemployment, and the increasing rate of organized crime. And now industrialized countries like the US seek to restrict migration, choosing only to take in the cheap foreign labor that they need, like the mushrooming number of nurses and medical practitioners to take care of their sick and aging population. At the same time, they have tolerated the presence of undocumented workers to take care of the dirty jobs and only undertake crackdown when local workers complain of unemployment due to the inherent weakness of the system. Thus putting the blame of unemployment on foreign workers and pitting them against the local workers. When the problem emerges, it is the victims who feel the hit. For example, for one, the US and other countries stubbornly refuse to take direct responsibility for the victims of human trafficking and prostitution. Funds for public awareness, job skills training, emergency centers, counseling and prosecution and enforcement of the law against traffickers are to be done mainly at the source level. Receiving countries, instead of rehabilitating the victim in its own shores, or at the very least, providing even asylum or residency, would rather have the trafficked victim put on orderly and safe return to the country which she left in the first place, so that more and more victims of trafficking are punished than repatriated. In this context, the U.S. strategy of prevention, protection, and prosecution is narrow and self-serving. In fact, it frees countries and their puppet states, such as what we have now in the Philippines, from direct responsibility and could ultimately lead to blaming the victim once again. And to understand our country's experience, the economic survival of the family is the most decisive force that will compel anyone to be separated from the family. The state, the Philippine economy specifically now under Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo's regime, is on the brink of collapse, leads to the exodus of Filipinos leaving the country, with thousands of them falling into the hands of traffickers. The worsening economic crisis leads to further deterioration of Filipino families' economic status and is compelling fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters to seek livelihood abroad, to augment the family's income. And yet, despite women's contribution, the feudal patriarchal relations between men and women remain, and society in general continues to view women as inferior and second-class citizens. Majority of poor women work as farmer tenants, seasonal plantation workers, or contract workers in the manufacturing industry, and burdened by low wages, absence of benefits, and job insecurity. As primary homemakers, women resort to ingenious ways to earn extra income, providing laundry services, vending food in the streets, etc., or to seek work overseas. In fact, majority of present-day overseas Filipino workers are women, who are in their jobs most vulnerable to abuse, such as domestic workers and entertainers. Our government's much-touted low hunger incidence in the country, in a survey conducted during the last quarter of 2007, is at 16.2%, remains high, and compared to 100 incidents back in a slightly lower average of 11.9 over the last 10 years. This hunger incidence can only be appreciated as lower relative to a 21.5% all-time high post during the third quarter of 2007. No amount of propaganda or manipulated statistics could conceal the intensifying poverty of the Filipino people. And women bear the brunt of the severity of the crisis. Effects of the plummeting economy and livelihood push urban poor families towards further misery. While they suffer from the uncertainty of a regular source of livelihood, their homes and communities are being demolished to give way to so-called urban development projects, ostensibly for the benefit of a merely few. Rather than social service, the government's housing project is in fact a profit-making endeavor. The government has also turned its back on providing needed social services like health services to the people. And that leaves us with no choice but to go abroad for survival. Not even the most comprehensive law that covers all the acts resorted to by human trafficking syndicates that can prevent our women from risking their life and limb in search of work abroad, even as the prospect of prostitution and sexual exploitation stares them in the face. Not only once or twice have we heard of Filipino women returning for work abroad and trying their luck again and again despite harrowing experiences. We mean to make the victims and potential victims to take up the cudgels themselves to fight the global human trafficking, especially among women and children. It is imperative for us to rise from the depths of oppression and exploitation and turn the situation around. It is time to expose the role of the governments and the global perpetrators of human trafficking. It is high time we gather the strength of the victims and involve them in class and national struggle and the struggle of the peoples of their host countries. Yes, we must respond to calls for prevention, protection, and prosecution. We must work for greater coordination and mutual assistance and expand our network and alliances. But we must not fall trap of absolving U.S. imperialism and the puppet government from criminal responsibility. Such pretenders to the throne of human rights must be exposed for what they really are. Friends, we must organize locally and forge international solidarity. We must take matters into our own hands, take the initiative and the leadership. We must set up organizations of men, women, and children in workplaces, in schools, and communities. We are not only up against organized crime. Human trafficking roots from an entire gamut of social, economic, and political structures that do not only cause it, but protect it. Without organizations, we cannot continue with our task to put a stop to human trafficking. We must organize victims of human trafficking, reach out to millions of migrants in various parts of the globe, and get them involved in this campaign. But shattering the problem of human trafficking involves, as in the case of the Philippines, changing also our system, changing the semi-colonial and semi-feudal structure of our country. And this problem must be addressed basically right in the home country with the support of our compatriots overseas. As long as there is widespread hunger and one born out by social inequality and injustice, our organization, Gabriela, will continue to enlighten, organize, and mobilize women, particularly from the poorest and most oppressed sectors of society, until women's labor force and not women's bodies become vital to the economic life of our country. Sex trafficking for prostitution will see no end. And in the midst of every people power will stand the millions of women who will fight not only for their basic rights for job, food, home, and freedom from discrimination and exploitation, but for the rights of women to be part of any movement for societal change. We must remember that addressing the problem of human trafficking goes beyond prevention, protection, prosecution. It calls for no less than social change. It calls for mass movement of peoples, of women, men, and children, whose struggles are linked as one toward national liberation. Thank you, and good morning.